I sat in a high-end coffee shop in downtown Austin, the glass reflecting a life I had built from nothing, and sitting across from me was the ghost who'd abandoned it. My mother, Stephanie. She hadn't seen me in 23 years, not since I was 9. Now she was here stirring a latte with my half-brother Logan, a 19-year-old stranger slouched beside her. She didn't ask about my life. She got straight to the point. "Everleigh, you're doing so well," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Logan needs his tuition. We need $75,000. I just stared. Logan scoffed, not even looking up from his phone. "And I need a new car, something decent, 40,000 minimum." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to laugh to tell him to shut up. She just nodded in agreement. The air left my lungs. "I can't help you." Her face hardened. "I gave you life," she hissed, the warmth vanishing. "This is the least you can do. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded, put a $20 bill on the table, more than enough for their coffees, and said I have to get back to work. Stephanie looked surprised. She probably expected tears or a fight. She probably had a whole script ready for how she would handle my emotional outburst. What she didn't realize is that I don't do emotional outbursts. I'm a cybersecurity analyst. I deal in data, in patterns, in finding the breach. And I had just identified a major one. I walked out of that cafe, got in my car, and drove straight to my condo. My hands were steady on the wheel. My breathing was even. But my mind was running 1,000 queries a second. How did she find me times check? Asterisk. How did she know how much I earned times check? Asterisk. How did she know I had the times capacity times to pay $75,000? I got to my apartment, locked the deadbolt, and went straight to my home office. I didn't pour a drink. I opened my laptop. Years ago, I'd moved my dad's entire business for the garage, his invoicing his parts, ordering his taxes onto a secure cloud accounting system. I did it so he wouldn't have to stress about the paperwork, so I could manage it for him from Austin. I set up the system. I wrote the code for the custom modules, and I built the security architecture. I knew every line of it. I typed in my admin credentials and pulled up the master access logs for his account. My heart wasn't pounding, it was cold, methodical. I filtered by logon event for the past 72 hours. There it was. Monday, 9:14 p.m. An IP address I didn't recognize. I ran a trace. The IP was registered to a public internet cafe in Austin, 3 blocks from the hotel Stephanie had checked into. 48 hours before she ever walked into that coffee shop. She hadn't just times asked times me for money. She had times investigated times me. But the breach was deeper than that. I kept digging. The logs showed the user had accessed the payroll and transfers module. They had seen every monthly transfer I'd sent to my dad for the last 5 years. They had also accessed the user profile tab, which had my personal details, my full name, my email, my physical address. She hadn't times found times me. She had times hunted times me. And she hadn't just violated my trust. She had violated my times father's asterisk. She had hacked into the private business of the man she abandoned, the man who had stayed all to get leverage to extort their daughter. The betrayal was doubled. It wasn't just an attack on me, it was an attack on him. I looked at the keylogger on my desk, the one I used for penetration testing my own client's systems. I thought about the conversation at the cafe. The demand. The entitlement. I realized this wasn't a family dispute. This was a security threat. And I was going to handle it the only way I knew how. I was going to find every vulnerability trace, every connection, and I was going to lock them out permanently. Why did I check those logs? Why was my first instinct suspicion and not sadness? Because my entire life was built on the foundation of her abandonment. I was 9 years old when Stephanie walked out. I didn't get a tearful goodbye or a long explanation. I just came home from school one Tuesday, and her closet was empty. The only thing she left behind was the faint scent of her perfume in the hallway and a pile of bills my father couldn't pay. My dad, Kenneth, was a good man, a great mechanic. But his small auto shop in Milwaukee was a relentless, soul-crushing grind. He worked from before the sun came up until long after I was asleep. He'd come home smelling of grease and motor oil slumped down at our tiny kitchen table and just stare at the stack of invoices. Some days he'd clear maybe $75. $75. That was supposed to cover the mortgage on the shop, the lights at our house, and food for both of us. He never complained to me, but I saw the weight of it on his shoulders. I saw it every time he'd skip dinner claiming he ate at the shop just so I could have a full plate. I started working when I was 14. Babysitting stocking shelves at the corner store, any cash job I could find. I learned early that no one was coming to rescue us. If I wanted a different life, I had to build it myself line by line, dollar by dollar. School was my escape route. While other kids were worrying about parties, I was teaching myself to code. Math, logic, data, cybersecurity. It just clicked with me. It was logical. It was about finding vulnerabilities, protecting systems of intrusion. The irony wasn't lost on me. That scholarship wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my exit visa. It got me to Austin. It got me this career. The day I got my first real paycheck as a cybersecurity analyst, I sat in my new empty apartment and cried. Then I opened my laptop and set up an automatic transfer. $1,000 a month straight to my dad's account. He never asked for it. In fact, he argued against it. He'd call his voice rough with emotion and say, "Everly, this is your money. You earned this." But he didn't understand. It wasn't my money. It was his. It was the cost of every double shift he pulled. It was the new hydraulic lift he needed for the shop but put off buying for a decade. It was every night he came home too tired to eat and just fell into bed. I wasn't just sending him money. I was trying to pay back a debt that had nothing to do with dollars and everything to do with sacrifice. A sacrifice Stephanie never understood and never cared to. You have to understand why I kept sending that money. It wasn't just love for my dad. It was the trap of normalizing cruelty. When you grow up in a system that's broken, you don't see it as broken. You just see it as time's normal asterisk. My normal was that my father struggled, and I fixed it. My normal was that my mother was a ghost who didn't care. My role was assigned early. I was the responsible one, the one who patched the holes, the one who made sure the ship didn't sink. It wasn't even a choice. It was just the air I breathed. That's how they get you. They don't ask you to carry the weight all at once. They just hand you one small piece after another until you're holding everything. And you've forgotten what it feels like to have empty hands. I was still holding everything when my intercom buzzed 2 days after that first cafe meeting. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I saw my mother's face on the small security screen, my blood went cold. Logan was standing behind her looking impatient. "Everly, honey, please," her voice crackled through the speaker. "We just want to talk. To apologize." My instincts, the ones I used to detect phishing scams and social engineering, were screaming at me. Asterisk. Do not open the door. Asterisk. But there was that 9-year-old girl inside me, the one still waiting for her mom to come home. Against my better judgment, I buzzed them in. The second they walked into my apartment, the energy shifted. Stephanie put on a performance, her eyes filling with tears as she looked around. "Oh, Everly," she said, her voice thick. "Look at what you've built. I'm so sorry. That wasn't me at the cafe. I'm just so desperate." Logan, meanwhile, walked straight to my couch and sat down, immediately pulling out his phone. He didn't look desperate. He looked bored. I stayed, standing my arms crossed. "Why are you here, Stephanie?" I wanted to explain, she started, but Logan cut her off. "Hey, where's your bathroom?" he asked, not looking at me. I pointed down the hall. To the left. He stood up and sauntered down the hallway. But he didn't turn left toward the bathroom. He turned right toward my home office. My heart hammered. "Logan, the bathroom is—" I know, he called out, just grabbing a glass of water first. "But my office isn't near the kitchen." My cybersecurity training kicked in. Asterisk. Trust your gut. Verify. Asterisk. I started walking, not running down the hall. I heard a faint click times, as I approached the office doorway. I rounded the corner. Logan was there, leaning over my laptop, which was docked but asleep. He was plugging a small, nondescript USB drive into the back of my machine. He hadn't heard me. "What is that?" My voice was quiet, colder than I intended. He jumped, ripping the drive out of the port. Nothing, God, you scared me. I was just checking if this was a charger. That's not a charger, Logan. I walked toward him, holding out my hand. Give it to me. It's mine. It's just a USB stick, he snapped, trying to pocket it. But I saw it. I saw the cheap plastic casing, the generic branding. It was a $10 keylogger. A piece of spyware. The kind you plug in once, and it records every single keystroke, every password, every bank account number, and emails it to the attacker. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to install a backdoor into my entire life. I grabbed the USB drive from his hand. Stephanie, who had followed me down the hall, saw the look on my face, and her fake tears stopped instantly. Everly, don't overreact. He's just a kid, he doesn't know any better. He knows exactly what this is, I said, my voice shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, clarifying rage. And so do you. You came here to plant spyware on my computer. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, her mask of the loving mother evaporating. We just needed to. To what, steal my passwords, drain my accounts? You hacked my father's accounting software, and when that wasn't enough, you tried this. I held up the keylogger. This isn't a family visit. This is a home invasion. Get out. You can't talk to me like that, Stephanie shouted. Get out, both of you, before I call the police. The threat hung in the air. Logan, for the first time, looked scared. He grabbed his phone and scrambled for the door. Stephanie stared at me, her face a mask of pure hatred. You'll regret this, Everly. You're throwing away your family. You're not my family, I said, closing the door and locking it behind them. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called my lawyer. My hands were steady as I dialed. This wasn't a family matter anymore. This was a security breach. I was at my lawyer's office an hour later, the small USB drive sitting on the polished mahogany desk between us. Tell me again, Mark said, leaning forward. I laid it all out. The IP logs from my father's cloud accounting software showing an unauthorized login from an internet cafe near her house, the sudden demand for $75,000, and now this. A physical keylogger. Mark looked at the evidence. He wasn't a family lawyer. He was a corporate litigator who handled cybercrime. Everly, he said slowly, this is attempted wire fraud. At best. At worst, it's a conspiracy to commit several felonies. They're not just dysfunctional. They're criminals. He immediately began drafting a petition for an emergency restraining order. That evening, Mark called me. It's worse than we thought, he said. His voice was grim. I had a private investigator run a background check on Stephanie and her new husband, the father of Logan. And Logan isn't enrolled in any university. There is no $75,000 tuition. I sat down, my knees weak. Then what's the money for? Her husband has a gambling problem. A big one. He owes a loan shark. And the $75,000 is the price to keep his legs from being broken. The payment is due in 1 week. Of course. It all made sense. The desperation, the escalation, the sheer, naked audacity of it. That's when I finally understood the psychology I was dealing with. This was the delusion of power from an empty wallet. My mother's entire identity was built on having not being. She had the successful second husband, the beautiful house, the life she'd always wanted. But it was a house of cards. When that life was threatened, she didn't feel like she was times asking times me for help. She felt she was times entitled. Times to my resources to maintain her facade. In her mind, my success wasn't mine. It was a stockpile she was times owed, times to patch the holes in her own story. She wasn't a beggar. In her mind, she was just transferring funds from an account that rightly belonged to her. That's why she was so brazen. That's why she felt no guilt. She believed my life was just an extension of her own, and I was just a resource to be tapped. The restraining order was filed. The temporary injunction was granted. A process server was scheduled to deliver the papers to her house the next morning. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I just felt tired. I was sitting on my balcony watching the Austin skyline turn purple when my phone rang. It was Stephanie. I almost declined it, but my lawyer had advised me to record any further contact. I hit record and answered, putting the phone on speaker. For a second, there was just silence. Then a sound I hadn't heard in 23 years. A raw, ragged sob. Everlay. Her voice was tiny. Gone was the entitlement. The sharp anger. This was the sound of pure, unfiltered desperation. Everlay times, please asterisk. You can't do this. I know I lied. I'm sorry. Please, I'm begging you. I need the money. You don't understand what they'll do to him. She was weeping. The kind of ugly, gasping cry that's impossible to fake. They're going to hurt him, Everly. They're going to break him. Please, it's $75,000. It's nothing to you. Please just help me this one time. I'll pay you back, I swear. I sat there listening to the woman who gave birth to me beg for money to save her gambler husband. I waited for a flicker of pity, a spark of empathy. Nothing. Just quiet. A cold, sterile silence in my own chest. That is not my problem, Stephanie. The sobs stopped. Abruptly. I heard a sharp intake of breath. What? What did you say? I said, that is not my problem. Your husband's debts are not my problem. The threats he's receiving are not my problem. You are not my problem. The silence stretched, and then the desperation curdled back into the rage I recognized. How can you be so cold? She shrieked, her voice cracking. I am your times, mother. Times I gave you times. Lifetimes. You owe me this. You owe me. There it was, the final desperate trump card, the one she thought was a checkmate. I leaned forward, my voice as calm and clear as the evening air. My mother left when I was 9 years old. She left me with a good man who worked his fingers to the bone in a garage smelling of oil and despair while she went off to build a new life. I paused, letting the words land. You aren't my mother, Stephanie. You are just a woman I used to know. Do not ever call me again. I hung up. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't wait for more screaming or crying. I simply pressed the red button. Then I opened my contacts, found her name, and pressed block this caller. The restraining order would be served in the morning. She couldn't call, she couldn't text, she couldn't show up. She was finally locked out of my life, just as she had locked me out of hers. The aftermath was quick and quiet. The restraining order was served. Stephanie and her husband, unable to pay their debts, filed for bankruptcy. They lost the house. Logan, I heard, was forced to get a job at a fast food restaurant to help cover their rent on a small apartment. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, called me about a month later. Her voice was heavy with a kind of weary sadness. Everlay, she said, I heard what happened. And I need to apologize. For what? For not saying anything sooner. Stephanie. She's been like this her whole life. Twisting things, using people, always making herself the victim. We all just learned to manage it. To walk on eggshells. We never thought she'd go this far. I'm so sorry, honey. We should have protected you. Her words were a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still bleeding. It wasn't just me. I wasn't crazy. After the call, I sat at my laptop and looked at my bank account. The $20,000 Stephanie had tried to transfer was still there, safe. For a moment, I just stared at the number. It felt heavy. Like blood money I never wanted. And that's when I understood what real justice looked like. There's the justice of punishment. That's the kind you see in movies. It's about watching the person who hurt you fall. It's about retribution. It feels good for a moment, but it's an empty victory because it keeps you chained to the past. But then there's the justice of the sower. This kind of justice isn't focused on the past. It's focused on the future. It's not about destroying what they built. It's about times building times what they tried to destroy. It's about taking the very weapon they used against you and turning it into a seed. I took that $20,000, the exact amount Stephanie had tried to steal, and I made a few calls. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Milwaukee. I walked into my old high school, a place that held so many memories of exhaustion and desperate hope. I met with the principal, and I established the Kenneth Foster STEM Scholarship, a full-ride scholarship awarded every year to a kid from a single-parent home who wanted to pursue a degree in tech. The first recipient was a quiet girl with fire in her eyes, a girl who reminded me a lot of myself. That was my justice. Not watching Stephanie fall, but ensuring that another kid like me would get to rise. I still send my dad $1,000 a month. But the feeling is different now. It's not an obligation. It's not the heavy weight of the responsible child. It's just a gift. It's just love. He's thriving. The shop is doing well. He calls me every Sunday and we talk for an hour, not about bills or problems, but about our lives. My mother taught me what love times is an asterisk. My father and the family I've chosen taught me what at times is asterisk. What does real family mean to you? Share your own stories down in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about truth, boundaries, and healing.